I must say it's a real honor for me to support this whole project about the Black Mountain College, and I hope I can give some material and ideas about my own experience as a student and teacher. So I start first with all those years, no, 1 year, but I studied with Beuys from 67 to 71 when he had to leave his professorship. So he was cut off enormous investment and engagement, and my first studies were medicine, then I switched to theater and had a lot of experience with great directors like Fritz Kortner. I did three cooperations with him, and also I even met Gustav Gründgens in Hamburg. So I think, and I studied at the Düsseldorf Academy with Theo Otto, but then after I cut off with this whole practical field in the summer of '67, when I was working on the magic flute with Theo Otto. And so on the 2nd of June in '67, when Benno Ohnesorg was killed, so I really was asking myself, what are you doing here in Salzburg with these problems that of course arose. But so I decided to quit with the theater work, and then I studied and started with that whole activities in the voice class. And what I'm going to show you first is the year 69, and so there are some. That was an enormous year. So it is first sort of this annual exhibition in which I think we start with. Maybe you see sort of private, some private, not private, I mean there was no difference between private and sort of public life, but it starts with that. And this is not the first one. Is it? Yeah? No. Anyhow, so here you see already those four artists. They committed suicide. The last one is Palermo. I mean, no one really knows how he died, but so this is a sort of, yeah, okay, we start with that. It's a sort of public statement in Düsseldorf, and so they were all. It's before Palermo quite on the right. It's Rainer Giese and Günther Sieber and Klaus Dürr. The first three of them committed suicide, and Palermo. So he died in 77, I think. Yeah. So this is really these are many images, and so it goes like a fast movie, 3 seconds for every image, and so I do the moderation quite free, and if any, but I think it's better like this, and maybe I come to you because I don't like to speak from this sort of thing here. But I come to you, Arnold, and then I moderate it from there. Is it okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Should we make a break after the first part? Because now we have like the second part.
Yeah, a little break. Yeah.
We could maybe also talk a little bit publicly first about this period, and then go to while you're setting up the second.
And it's coming directly after.
Oh, comes
So, so, but maybe so she can just stop it.
You just give us
for
a
minute.
session.
Okay.
Stay there.
So, It is. It also shows first this annual show in the Kunstakademie Düsseldorf. Then the next part is an exhibition of the Beuys Klasse, which is coming. It's in the Museum of Trier, and you can see how it anticipated a lot of forms of installation, and so yeah. Then because it goes so fast, I will do it before. Yeah. Okay. Then we have this this 1 week of LIDL, which was this reform project of Jörg Immendorf and some Danish artists, Bjørn Norgard, Henning Christiansen, some Fluxus people, and so on. Then you see it. How it was not even a week, then it was closed down by the police, and so the whole academy was closed in that on the 7th of May in '69. Then you see a solidarity action by James Lee Byars, who came then and made a brilliant action outside. Then you see Intermedia Heidelberg with Klaus Steg. He organized the meeting, and then the festival 2000 at the Academy Charlottenborg, where we all went then, and so it was really a year of many festivals and traveling, and so we were on the move. And I think the last image is, yeah, it's again in Düsseldorf. So I think we can start. Thank you. Yeah, that was Imi Knöbel, my marriage with Knöbel for some years. It was '68. These are the 2 Imis, and Rainer Giese and Imi Knöbel. This is the guy who also committed suicide. He was acting like Tiny Tim that time. So I was doing palm reading, and so that is my only sculpture I ever did. So this was this annual exhibition, so when all this stuff, Henning Christiansen, Ursula Reuter, yes. So the same time in Berlin, what happened here in '69, Beuys had a great show, so we all went there, and at the National Gallery. This is Kunsthalle Düsseldorf. Yeah, this is a show of the Beuys Klasse. So, Stüttgen, it's Johannes Stüttgen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you see how it is full, and everyone was in action and did something. And yeah, well, you see discussions and. So that was Immendorf, so he made a hole out of the museum. Someone closed the entrance, and so that was the director, and he had to go to the psychiatric clinic, so he had to stop. So you see afterwards, so it was really these joints, so these sort of sculptures, and yeah, it was not bearable for this institutional practice then, and I went there again with Stüttgen. So I made the holy curtain so that we had some money, and yeah, it was quite well business. So this is it, indeed, that was his Palermo. So that before that was when he did Ja, Ja, Nee, Nee. So that was Henning Christiansen in Raum 19. So you see all the discussions every day in the class. It was about this, you know, threefold model of, and now it's still this LIDL week, and you see how the police is entering the same space, and so we had to stop. So they are coming, you know, it's the academy there, and yes, so he said, come, we have to go. And then everything happened outside, so he was sort of bound to the door, and they had one formal reason. That's why some had slept in overnight with some mattresses in the building. So, and you see all the posters and stuff. It's the young man who died. These are all the artists per Kirkeby from Paul Gern and all these from Copenhagen. This is Bjørn Norgard, Lena Adler-Petersen, so they didn't. So everything then happened outside in the garden, and this is it. Bureaucracy. These are nice women from the Mensa. So sitting and thinking, what can we do? It's Immendorf with the left and the right. Jessica. Eva. Jetzt Johannes Stüttgen. Palermo. Chris Reinecke. So then Easy Fishman came, it's a diamond dealer, and he financed the whole action of James Lee, which is now starting. James Lee Byars. This action was called Pink Plane, and you will see what the idea is behind. Pardon?
Who took all these photos?
Me. Yeah, and so I started photography in that after this in the late 60s. I could not stay in a studio or in an atelier alone, so I took the camera to be testimony. So the idea was that a couple, 2 or 3, so they were sort of bound together. So this pink silk. Eva critical. That's Klaus Steg. So now we start with a bit with Intermedia in Heidelberg, which followed then. That was also in May, yeah. So these were the sort of gang from the Ruhrgebiet and with their bikes in. It was also the university building in Heidelberg. That's Henning Christiansen and his piece. So. Then there was a fight between, this was the students' building, and so they threw things from above, and then those from the intermedia went there, and so they had a sort of, discussion. It's also a student from the boys' class, Kramer. Now you see the Christo piece, which is not so known. It's the America House in Heidelberg. This is Herrenhausen on our way to Copenhagen, so we stopped in Hannover, Herrenhausen. There was a show in the Orangerie. And that's already a Charlottenborg festival. Stanley Brown, Kaspar König, Easy Again, Fishman. This was a big, this was, I think, by Paul Gernes, this big shower. It was great. So you could take a shower during the exhibition. So I've showed some of these photos. Back in Düsseldorf. Okay, so here we are.
Maybe I could, first of all, we thank you for this. Maybe we take a moment just to reflect on this period. I know that you were asked probably very often about this, your connection to this history, but here in the context of discussing this very interesting period in Black Mountain, and also we've been looking at some other parallel developments, not only in the States but also in Europe, some contemporary projects. We have an interest in perhaps the educational methods, if one could even speak about that in terms of Beuys. I found a quote, maybe just to bring us into that sphere. Well, there's a famous quote that was from Art Forum from 1969, "To be a teacher is my greatest work of art," which is often quoted. But I found another one which I translated myself. "I would most like to create a condition where the students teach themselves and learn. Perhaps I direct that a little. I'm trying to achieve this state so that the teacher-student relationship simply oscillates, that the one who hears is the student, and the one who speaks is the teacher. In the moment when this changes, this teacher-student relationship changes. Which is a very clear and strong statement. On the other hand, we know that there are certain moments in art history, certain movements where a very charismatic figure creates a moment around him or her, thinking of other living theater, Julian Beck. I mean, there's many of these figures, and I was also moved to hear that you said in the lecture in February that came the question, how did Beuys deal with your work as you began your work in photography, and in maybe a very different direction than he worked? You know, what was his approach? What was in what way did he create a space for the students? You know, we have a sense of it from the images, but perhaps you can say a few words.
Yeah, I think what you say, that the one, what he said, Beuys, that the one of this, if a student was speaking, so he is the teacher, and so this permanent change of that's very true, and I think, of course, he was a very charismatic and figure, but many things today are misunderstood, of course, and I think it was what he did first was that he opened the academy and he invited all these Fluxus artists to come as visiting artists, like this visiting artists, what this system that you have in the US or had always before. So I never heard that from any other academy in Germany or Europe at that time, and so that was a great chance for us to see him with Pike, with Bob Morris or Yvonne Rainer or so, and how they act together, cooperated together. He brought Dieter Roth to the academy, Robert Fillou, and many others. So he was always interested not to be that guru, what they write about him today, which is bullshit. Then he was the one who really strongly built the connection to the north, to Denmark. So he brought Ole John, a very then important filmmaker, to Düsseldorf. So and we tried to build a photo and film class, which was not existing, and not the director nor all the other they didn't want it at all. They said this is not art.
Art, yeah.
I mean, it's you know, about media and art, and so it's still the same a bit, even today. And so I must say, it is not that he was only sort of gathering the students. That was what they blamed him to just do it, to make his power position bigger and bigger, to gather like 300 students around. It was like this, whenever he had an action somewhere in Europe, so then the students or the young people were so interested, so then they came and wanted to know more about his work, and so it came that many stayed in Düsseldorf. They could discuss with the whole existing class, and so it grew bigger and bigger. But he never said, no, you cannot, so if they were interested, so he was there like day and night, and yeah, he cleaned the classes, the rooms, so it was always with this Besen.
Yeah, broom.
Broom, yeah. And but it was such a magic point that, of course, the colleagues from the university, from the academy, so they grew more and more jealous and
threatened.
And so, and then we had this thing that there should be a numerus clausus, around 70, also at the art academy, because they wanted to stop him. and he did not accept it, and so he went with all those students who still wanted to be in the class, went to the secretary office and stayed there day and night and waited that until they gave them the permission to study, you know. So, and this did not happen, and at that point, so the minister of North Rhine-Westphalia said so that he is has a Berufsverbot, you know. This was the term then in that time. And but you see, before, I mean, all these ideas with this LIDL Academy, which was already on the way to reform all this, you know, sort of hermetic academic idea of how to teach and how to think about art, and so I mean, I think parallel to his statements, so he was always thinking to broaden up the artistic practice. So he said, well, you can go into some social profession and this and this. So so that not everyone could be this sort of market hero, you know, and so he stopped with this idea that everyone, you know, and he stopped with all this competition in between the students, and gave them new ideas how to involve them as an artist in many fields of social and society. I don't want to talk too much.
No, it's very important what you say, because then, in fact, as that would have been my next question, that, of course, we know that there was much discussion. There was also much discussion in Black Mountain about what is an artist, what is the role of artists in society, and but then his, let's say that his reform ideas or ideas of education were then also reflected in the practice, in which way he dealt with the students and encouraged them. But coming back to your work, I did find actually a quote here that Imi Knobel and his and also the other Imi, Rainer Giese, said that that when they came to, they heard about Beuys and they came not knowing very much about what Beuys was about, and when they showed their work that they were making at that time, that they felt that he didn't have really a direct connection to what they were doing, but they immediately had the allowance to go further and to develop it. So again, I don't know, at the point at which you left the academy and this period dissolved, what was the approach of Beuys to your own work and its development in the early years?
So he was also one of those teachers who are not, who wait until young people come to them, I want to be your student, but he was also looking for students. Yeah? So I was still in the same building, but in this theater class with Theo Otto, but he sort of had watched me, and then he came upstairs and said, what are you doing here? So I was sort of drawing costumes for Hamlet and, you know, all these things. And I said, we discussed so much more important things down, and I think that, come to the class. And but of course, I think I was there in this class from 63 or 64 until 67, and I was in a way never in that class, because this Theo Otto, he always sent me as assistant to the most complicated directors, you know, like Fritz Kochner. And so I had no problems with this type of artists, because I think it was so familiar to me, yes. This energy and this really dreaming of something impossible. And that was when I was still studying this sort of ground courses in Hamburg. So it was a bit boring for me, just this fine art. And then asked for a little contract at the Deutsche Schauspielhaus in Hamburg, and so I went there in the Malersaal as volunteer, and then I met this Grönkens there and his famous Faust Inszenierung is, how do you say, inscenation or something?
Yeah, staging.
Yeah. Yes, and and then one day they said, now a real monster is coming, Fritz Kochner. And I said, why? And said, yeah, he wants to do rehearsals more than it is allowed, you know, the Gewerkschaft and all this. So, and then I was very interested, so I switched into this space and looked at the first stage probe, and it was really interesting what he wanted. So the whole stage design should be completely mobile and had an own dramaturgy, and so one should move into the other, and a wall into a column, or and vice versa, and so on. And then the whole technique, so they said, no, it's impossible, no, niet. And then I was the only one still sitting there and being really thinking, why, what is going on here? Because I went to the theater because it's a Gesamtkunstwerk, it's something that I was really interested in, and I said, now it's again this, you know. So then he said, and you, who are you, what are you, and what do you think? And I said, Mr. Kortner, I think all what you want is possible. So I was hired as his assistant, and it was the stage design of Theo Otto, who was but then very, very involved in many other, in Haifa and New York and all over the globe. So I did this job, and then he came short before the end, and so heard about a young girl going well with this Kortner. So that's how I met my next professor, Theo Otto. And so he took me to Berlin. And then I met the next professor because Beuys came and looked, what is she doing? And so, you know, and as I said, in the last thing was the Magic Flute in Salzburg. Then I really said goodbye to high culture, and I really wanted, you know, to do my own thing. And so it was the right moment. But he really worked on that.
Yes. So perhaps it's a good moment to then go forward into your own experiences.
I will just say something to this because. Okay, yeah, so I started teaching in 1990. I was 2 years in Hamburg, so it was also funny going back to where I had started with art studies. And then I got this call to Berlin, and in 92. And so it was, I must say, only under the condition I said I want to do this job when I get big laboratories for color and photography, and that I get a team around with from younger generations that I can work with theoretically in sciences and so on. So I wanted immediately start with an interdisciplinary team teaching. So you can imagine UDK 92, so they said nothing is possible. And then I took this, I took help from Peter Raue, which is a lawyer here, and I said, I cannot anymore with this bureaucracy, please do it for me and tell them and invite them to Düsseldorf to see all the laboratories that we were already had in, and I wanted the same for the students. So this was my, which is, you know, I thought this is what the reason that I got the call to teach there, you know. So it was a hard fight, but at the end, so I had some contingents for team teaching, and then I started my first sort of collaborator, that was Klaus Biesenbach, for 6 years. Because I wanted, so I very early intuitively I thought this will be the upcoming model of a curator. And this will be the more, maybe will get more importance than the artists. And
it happens.
It happened, yeah. No, but you know, so he was still also a medicine student,
yes,
and yeah. So very, very early. And so he had, there were these Kunstwerke. So,
yeah.
And now here you see with this series of lectures, which was only possible with, that started in '94. He was already the director of the Kunstwerke, and every interesting artist internationally came and wanted to have a sort of performance show or whatsoever. And then we took the chance to invite all of them to the faculty. So this is just one example, which I thought is really great, that you work in a sort of university or academy, and you have the network with some institutional places in the city, and so that you know there's an interchange of visiting artists from all over the world, and so we did it quite successful. Okay, I think now we can start, and this is the same, so I moderate very freely. And these are even some more images. So you just see a certain period of time from the class, and you see how the students act and how they sort of, yeah. It's David Buchmann. What was important for me is that any work, I mean, Zabet and Katja, so they started in '94 with gender courses, and so, but this was sort of underground-like, because officially they got no permission to do it. They would not integrate it in the curricula, because no, it was impossible, because they were not, they had no scientific statue or what, I don't know, all these things. And so then there was a program, it was called Berliner Förderprogramm für Chancengleichheit für junge Wissenschaftlerinnen. So that I really got many young scientists. That was like, let me see, I have. So I had very early Hito Steyer, then Madeleine von Bernstorff, Jutta Köter were there, of course, Zabet Buchmann, Katja Diefenbach. That's how they could start then officially through this program with all this gender and mainstreaming. And what was our thing, that any work of artists, of students, was discussed with the whole, with those from the laboratories and with those from the theory, and so that they were always together, and that we discussed any work of the students. And so I sort of followed this, because I was not the main talking, but that was mainly the students that were talking and criticizing and so on, talking. So they learned how to give an own lecture about their work, and you know, all these methods and practices that bring them into communication about their work and ideas, and they are even more critical under themselves than you would be as a teacher. Jetzt Katja Diefenbach. Jorinde Vogt, maybe you know her. And it was like a marathon. I mean, we had no time limit. It's Astrid Proll, she was also a teacher, and I could manage that when the head of the bureaucracy was ill. So it was a real. So we stopped after sometimes a whole night when everything was said from all those who came with their work, and then we stopped. So, and that was a real, a real marathon of discussions. And also many to these seminars of Katja and Zabet. So they, I remember, came here from the from this university here, and Humboldt and so on. So it was really what you think inter-universitary, interdisciplinary, and so on and so on. So and we had many guests often. No one knew after a while who is in the class or not, so I mean, this was not so. But I gave, of course, many of them the chance to get this immatriculation, and so they came from all over the world, and so that they could stay in Berlin. In that time, it was, I mean, still all these illegal clubs and places, and so it was a really a big spot to be in Berlin, and to have to be legal here with this immatriculation. I mean, I did not select any or so, because I only for this moment I want to show you how sort of relaxed and so the whole climate within these meetings, and I mean, there are other examples of these exhibitions, but I really preferred for today and to give this idea of how to practice art teaching, and to develop everyone, that he can talk mostly in front of a big audience, and contemporary and This is Miss Berlin. She calls herself Frau Berlin. Stefan Römer and so on. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Madeleine von Bernstorff. And then we developed, of course, after we have this really, it's nice, a big photo lab, and also I took care of the photo lab that Anna Oppermann installed, because she died very early, and so I also took care of her whole class and of her laboratories. She had the first in black for black and white photography, and so that we could keep it. And also then I founded a big digital laboratory with all these technologies, which were then necessary to switch from or mix from analog to digital back and forth. That they learn it, and so I think, I don't know, is it, maybe we can also start to discuss,
Yes, I wanted to, I planned to ask you what your ideal art class would be, and I think that you've answered that, but perhaps it's time to open up the discussion to the public. Do we have...
Question of understanding. So the photos you took in class, which seems to happen on a very regular basis, did you consider it important to discuss that with your students? That they becoming documented part of your work, part of your view on the situation, or didn't you think that was important to do?
Of course, they were, they agreed and they were aware, and it is the first, so it was like this, whenever, after some meetings, so I did a lecture for the students with the photos, so they always could see what the documentation was about. They also did a lot of documentation, and it was that even being in this class or doing all these meetings is a sort of performance, so they were absolutely aware. And of course it was supported by filming, or I mean there also exist a lot of film materials about it. For me it is it was very important, because I started like this during my own studies, and so I gave an example that also this sort of reality is important to do a documentation about it. And but you see, they are so involved, so I think it's not like they behave like performance or posing or so, No, but I think if you really work with media or within the media, so it is, and they really liked when I said after a month, okay, again. So I gave this sort of lectures. It's just really a short period of time here. There's tons of material. And also when I, for example, had to do in New York or wherever, so I took a lot of documentation about artwork, and so I integrated it, showed it to the students who could not be able to go to Moscow or wherever, you know. And also I did a lot of documentation about the Art Basel. So I always stayed overnight in this, and then I took, because I always said it's the biggest group show, the most amazing group statement, curated by the market conditions. So then I showed them also with this material, this, so was bleibt vom Hype, under this motto, so for example. Yeah. So it was a whole, yeah.
Well, yeah.
One question, because one of the starting points for Eugen Blumes and myself, the discussions about why doing an exhibition on the Black Mountain College now was also that we had this impression that after the Bologna reform, which was also affecting the art academies, or many art academies in Germany, and we thought this should be discussed again. What is the outcome of this reform for the art academies? Have you been involved in the discussions about the Bologna reform to be implemented in art academies, or have you just thought this is not a thing to discuss at all?
Haben wir noch ein Mikro hier?
It's coming.
Of course, I was very much involved in this discussion because I was now 7 years at the council, University Council in Vienna, where it started my job there in 2007, when I was sort of fired from my teaching job, then the academy in Vienna and some colleagues, so they asked me to go to this, is it Universitätsrat? Yeah?
Advisory
board. So then, because this EU, this cultural plan, was sort of exhausted, and it was clear that many plans did not succeed at all. So the politics reduced the money for things that they first promoted. And so I was at that point on that sort of platform to fight for new studies and that they further supported economically. So that was very interesting. I mean, the Academy Vienna is much further than this UDK in Berlin. And imagine, like Sabine Buchmann, she was with me more than 6 years. She never got into, she could never get a professorship at the UDK in Berlin. I mean, she gave a great example, but this was impossible because most of the colleagues, they did not want to implement any theory person in the UDK. That was also the reason why then, when I got 65, so when every male colleague prolongs 3 more years in his status as a professor, so I was, it was said, no, we changed the law and so on. 3 months later, so they came back to the old conditions. But they did not want me anymore because they did not want this idea of integrating theoretical critical theories within the artistic teaching. So then that's why I then was called to Vienna, and I must say that was a great chance, because I had to study myself all this new cultural heritage and this, so what things that will never be possible here in Berlin. And so I think I did it well, because I was really, finally I could support other colleagues that they are able to do it, and so they did not spoil or ruin any. But even there at the academy, there was this even much greater fight for this master bachelor thing and so on. So they wanted to keep the diploma, and but then the government, the political part, they wanted that they all follow this Bologna thing. So, and I think for teaching art, it makes, or it was not an advantage. The only thing that I thought is interesting, or could be interesting, that with this, that the whole theoretical field could more easily enter within this academic conservative field. But this failed. So otherwise, I mean, I was teaching in the States, I was teaching in China and so on, so I was often asked, how can we come to, so I think through this master bachelor system, it was more open, that globally the conditions were sort of easier for them to come, so it was more conform. But I think from the whole idea of how to teach art, I think this was not a really good idea, because the students are no longer able to do any artistic work, because they are, you know, have these modules and does this, and so they are not, they don't know about handcraft processes, and so they have no time to really physically to do any artwork.
I just have a very brief question, which really is striking for me, looking at the aesthetics of this documentation. It's
I
really
think now
amazing, because
it's repeating.
it's almost, for me, like it's almost like an art piece in itself. There are two things which are really remarkable for me. First of all, that you choose like a similar format of the black and white contrasts, and how you photographed this period, which is a very different one from the 1960s, and doing basically a comparable aesthetic in the 90s. I think that's very interesting as a documentary format for me. And also, what's also interesting is that when we look at the material which is left from Black Mountain, it is also a photographic black and white aesthetic. It's the only visual documents we have in this time. Even though there were, at the time of Black Mountain, there was a possibility of using film, for instance. There was never shot any kind of filmic material. So it's a very, very interesting format, a very interesting media to use, and also it gives it, even it's in relative proximity to our time, it already historicizes a period from in the 90s until 2010 or 9, whatever. It's very interesting to see.
I mean, it's the same. I have only one camera that I'm able to work with. Stay here. So I wanted to show. It's a little Leica, and I still use analog films and still black and white, because I think it's more analytical, and also combines the whole field from the beginning of photography until today. And it is. It's of course more work because you have to scan it and so to make it, you know, digital working. But I hope that, and I'm happy that you see it. I mean, I never had this. I never compared it because this was really done in the last days. This, so that when I saw this black and white photo, so I was sort of inspired. Why not taking that material and. Of course, the Beuys was the material from the '69 was of course black and white, but I never until the last moments or even Vienna. So I always do it in this black and white. It's not for me an aesthetical question or meaning, but. How to say it is I mean, if you would look at the one is lila and red and all, it would be all in color. Yeah.
We would be distracted from, perhaps, from the essence.
Yeah, and it of course it refers to many things that are so important in the past and will be important into the future, and yeah. And I think also that's what I saw today for the first time. First the boys' class, and then this. So yeah, it was also interesting for me. I haven't seen it in Düsseldorf yesterday or so. It was the first time. So and yeah, I have the same. Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your patience. I was afraid it's too much material, but
no.